Hey there. Today we're going to be talking about what does it take to make a 3D printed object from start to finish, from your mind to the finished model. The first question is, what does it take? Well, it takes an idea, and the idea that I'm using right here is just a simple turtle. You also need a computer, you need a program like Tinkercad that I'm using right here, it's free and online. You need a printing program. Later on you're going to see me use MakerBot Print, but you can also use free programs like Cura. You need a printer, a 3D printer, and then you need assorted cleaning and painting supplies like a Cricut, X-Acto knife, sandpaper, primer, paint, paintbrush, and sealer. The next question might be, how long does it take? Well, it takes about an hour and a half. This took me about an hour and a half of actual time, of actual work time. Total time, it took about 7 hours. Now the reason is, yeah, you're doing work as far as design and cleanup and painting, but most of the time you're sitting and waiting. The print itself took about 2.5 hours, and waiting in between priming and sealing and painting, all that together was about 3 hours. But the finished product is sturdy and it looks good. So you gotta start with some sort of design, and you can see my turtle start to take shape here. The more complicated the idea is, the more time it will take to design and clean and print. But it is essential to take that time to make a good build. Otherwise, you're going to be wasting your time because your print's going to be ruined and you're going to have to go back to the drawing board anyways. Let me give you an example. You can see how my turtle is flat on the build plate. There's a cardinal rule of 3D printing. Printers can't print on thin air. They have to be touching the ground at some point, or you have to make some sort of support structures. That's just good build design there. Now once you have your model, you're going to want to export it into your printer's program. Tinkercad makes the object into either an STL or an object file, and then you bring it into MakerBot Print. Now you can resize it, make it larger, make it smaller, adjust it on the build plate. You can adjust the print speed, the support structures, the thickness of the shell, all from this program. In Tinkercad, my model was very colorful, but as you notice here, it's only printing out in one color. That's because this printer only has one extruder. The filament, which is the plastic, is fed into the print head. When it reaches the extruder, it's heated up and then laid in thin layers, one on top of another, until you get your 3D printed model. Now, since they're laying layers on top of another, it's extremely important that your printer be calibrated. That means the distance between the extruder and the build plate has been set. If it is off just slightly, you will get a ruined model. Even with good calibration, no printer is perfect, and there will always be plastic residue that needs to be cleaned up. Now I'm going to take my build plate and remove the model from it. Then I'm going to take my Cricut and use it to remove the raft, which helps with build plate adhesion. There's a little support structure that was on the tail because the model can't print on the air that I had to remove. Then I'm going to take the X-Acto knife and clean up any strands or bumps that the model has. Now it's important to get these now, and the purpose of this is to make the model smooth for painting. Paint is not going to cover up any of these blemishes. It's only going to make them stand out more because the paint sticks to the little strands of plastic that are left over. To give it a nice finishing touch, I'm going to grab the sandpaper and make sure it's nice and smooth all around. Next, it'll be time for priming. Now, paint doesn't naturally stick to plastic, so primer helps the paint to stick to the surface. I'm going to take my can of primer and I'm going to simply mist the model, which means I'm going to move my hand from left to right and right to left about 10 to 12 inches away from it and mist the model, turn it over, and give it another coat. Now you have the option of putting several coats of primer if you'd like, but the more primer and paint you put on your model, the more it'll take away from the detail. Now it's time to paint the base coat. The base coat is going to kind of act as a foundation, and typically it will be the color that you use most in your model. So I'm going to go with a light brown for my turtle model. Next, after you've let it dry for a little bit, you're going to want to apply some detail. I chose a darker brown for the top parts of the shell. And then later you're going to see me use green for the arms, legs, and head and tail, and then black for the eyes. Now here you only see me apply one coat of paint, but after this dries, I do go back and add a second coat on top of this. But once you have your model finished and looking nice, the way you want it, we're going to go to sealing, which for me, I use a spray varnish. Similar to the primer, I'm just going to move my arm back and forth and simply mist the model on both sides. This is going to seal the paint so that when you pick it up, none of the paint rubs off on your fingers. The oils of your fingers doesn't take it off, and it becomes a nice finished model. And there you go. That's 3D printing from start to finish, idea to a finished model.